Hi, and thanks for watching another instructional video for CSCI 1300. In this video, we're going to be talking about how to start with classes and objects. So this is the beginning of object-oriented programming, and we're going to be working through an exercise in a series of videos here to build a simulation for a bank account through some kind of an object associated with some class. So when we talk about classes and objects, what are we talking about? Well, what this means is that with a class, we can create a blueprint for defining a new type of way of storing information or collections of information. What an object really is it is something associated with a class. Whichever class it's associated with, it contains all of the data that could be possibly stored within that class. So say we wanted to represent something like a bank account. With a bank account, we need to think about what are all the different kind of factors involved with representing a bank account. Well, we'd probably have to think about some variables that would create this kind of bank. We probably need to have a balance. We probably need to check that balance. We probably need to be able to do some operations on that balance. So we might need to deposit or withdraw funds, or we might need to compute interest and add it to the account. So we can think of whenever we want to do an operation, we can think of that as a function related to the class's ability to work. So if you want to do something with a class object, we have to build a function in order for that operation to be performed. That function has to be called on an object in order for it to occur, for it to actually be used. So we use functions related to objects on objects related to a class. So for instance, say we wanted to withdraw from the bank account. Well, say we have a bank account object. What we need to do is use a function called withdraw on a bank account object, go into that object, and if we have like a variable for the balance stored within that object, we can update it and then return the new balance. And the reason why we do this is because we want to encapsulate or protect the information that is stored. And that's why we have a public and a private section here. So before I go into too much information about this, which we will go into in a video here in the channel, but basically a class is divided into two areas: a public section, most likely where your functions will go, and a private section where your variables will go. Because we want the variables to be stored privately, and we want the functions to be accessed by anyone who wants to actually work with this object. So that means that they could be used elsewhere in the code if they're public. But if they're private, they have to be accessed through a function. That's the general thing here, is that the functions act kind of like helpers. They go and they get something, or they tell you that they've updated something. So let's talk about the operations. Let's break down what we need to do. We need to deposit funds, and we need to withdraw funds. So these are two operations that we could put into our public section, right? And we don't need to really do anything with them. So they could be void functions, and we could create a deposit function, and it would have to take in some kind of information related to the balance. So maybe we have a double to represent the amount that we want to deposit. And likewise, we could do the same thing with a withdraw. So we're building a function around the operation that we want to perform on the object at any given point in the future. So if we have a balance in an object, we basically can withdraw or deposit from it, no matter how many different bank account objects we have. Say we have like a giant array of them, like we're keeping track of everyone's information in the bank. We could do this on one person's account or multiple persons' accounts. So we're building a blueprint for that. And let's talk about the other functions, right? We might need to do something with interest. So we could create another function called add interest, it would take in some rate instead of some amount to calculate interest and then add it to the total. So every time that we do this, we are basically passing something in without returning something. And say we actually want to return something, we can actually use a data type to return what we want from the object. And here I'm going to use a constant double because I basically want to return a double every time, and I want it to be associated with get balance. So now let's think about what we need. Well, we're going to need, we've got our operations built into here. Now let's think about our public section. We're going to need two things which are called constructors. One of them will be default and one of them will be overloaded. And I'll get to that here in a sec, but let's go ahead and set this up. So we're going to create some bank constructor, which creates a new object, and it's a blank object. But say we wanted to do the same thing, but we wanted to actually define some balance into it. We could pass in a variable like initial balance, and this would create a new object with a balance. Instead of here, we have like a balance equal to 0, but this is a different balance than 0. This one allows us to pass in some new value or set the value at something, and this one basically just creates it for the first time. And if we create it for the first time, well, we could use any of the functions on that particular object. So we've really broken down in this video what we would need to do in order to actually do the operations on an object in a class. We need to be able to deposit funds. We've got a function to deposit. If we need to deposit or withdraw things, we have a withdraw function. To get interest, we basically have to do the same thing. We have to have a function to compute that interest. And likewise, we also need to have some kind of a function that's implied to really just check the balance as we go. And last but not least, we need to make sure that we have constructors so that we can actually generate objects for the first time. So say we wanted to create an object for the first time, we would basically call either the default or the overloaded constructor and pass it some balance. If we did this, we basically have to create the object, then use the deposit and pass in some initial amount. So that's all I've got for right now on this video. Thanks for watching and happy coding!